Welcome back. Let's bring in my panel straight away. Pauline Hanson's Chief of Staff, James Ashby. I was going to remember your seat that you're running for in a moment, but I'll come back to you on that, James. And broadcaster Lucy Zellick. Well, welcome to the program, Lucy. The city of Rockingham, this is in WA, just southwest of Perth, has become the latest local council to overturn a decision to scrap Australia Day celebrations. Now, in May last year, they were moving them away from January 26. But overnight, they've reversed that decision following a survey which found a majority, all surprises here, not me, the majority of people wanted it back on the 26th. One of their councillors, Peter Hudson, told 6PR Radio he doesn't think that local councils should even have a say on Australia Day.
It's a matter of national pride and it is a national day. So if we're going to have a public holiday which is celebrated across the country, then in my view, every state and territory and the subsequent local government areas should all celebrate the National Day on Australia Day. And that was feedback that I heard reflected to me even in person.
Lucy, first it was only in Adelaide, now it's Rockingham in Perth. Are we seeing a bit of a fight back here for common sense?
We are seeing a fight back for common sense, Peter, and you aptly described it before you threw to the commercial break about people power. And I think that's something that's largely missing from a lot of these conversations. When you speak to the everyday person, they're all in agreement that, we're so confused as to the time and the point in our history when it became a crime to be a patriot. When did it become problematic to be proud to be Australian? Why did we have supermarkets pulling Australian flags from shelves and effectively demonising anybody that just wanted to ignite their love and passion for this country, which is what Australia Day is about? Now it's reverted to something else entirely, and we've started to see a lot of councils and people start to really demonise people and put them into this box of being problematic for wanting to celebrate the country and being proud of being Australian. I certainly am a proud Australian. I'm the first generation daughter of immigrants who legally came to this country in 1968. My father boarded a boat and loves everything that Australia has to offer. This is what this day is about. It's disappointing that we're in a situation where councils have had to now put out votes and to have the community use their voices and raise them up to say, hey, we don't agree with this decision, right? But I'm proud of the fact that they have moved to listen to their councils and to listen to their constituents. But the fact that it got to this in the first place is really largely very disappointing. One of the key things that I'll make as a final point on this is that the majority of the Indigenous respondents, 7% of them were Indigenous, the majority of them agreed that they would like to keep it on January 26, right? So who is this appeasing? Is this just the woke agenda and our politicians deciding to tick a box and say, no, we can't celebrate it on Australia Day? What are our Indigenous communities saying about it, right? And we know that this is a pretty divisive issue, but let's start listening to the people. And I'm glad that this is something that's happened in this instance.
Well, you're not wrong. And I think coming out of The Voice last year, we've all found our own voice. I think we've all got a little bit braver in barbecues and talkback radio, wherever it might be, to speak our mind. Your boss, I have to say, James Ashby, has always spoken her mind. I mean, she really gave it to Chris Kenny last night on this point. Let's have a listen.
Are you convinced that these welcomes to country before big games are a good idea?
Yeah, look, I think they are. I think they really set a good tone. And Uncle Colin, who'll be doing it on Saturday afternoon at the grand final, I think it's something, though, that we'll continue to do. We've been doing it for a while.
But why? I mean, what's the justification?
Well, I think it's because we want to be a competition and that's inclusive and makes people welcome. And I think it actually sets the tone for the game.
I think it's divisive. I'm offended by it. I'm sick of hearing about it. I think it's tokenistic, and it was actually not a common thing at the time. A lot of the tribes fought with each other. They didn't welcome each other to the country.
Before we played your boss there, James, I played a grab from this morning from 3AW Radio. This is the head of the AFL now, the new head, Andrew Dillon, really pushed on that display we saw in in Brisbane a couple of weeks ago that's got everyone so fired up. I think that's got under your boss's skin, it's got under my skin, it got under Tony Abbott's skin last night. I mean, if it's at an Indigenous event, fine. Sparingly, fine. I have no truck with acknowledgements. I'll accept the occasional welcome to country. Not at the footy, not when we land a plane, not when I get in a lift, not when I open a website, which is happening now more and more. This is where I think Australians are saying we have had enough.
Well, I'll give one commitment on your show, and I'll hopefully follow through if I'm elected here in Keppel. Peter, I will never give a welcome to country. I don't care what the event is. I will never give one, and people are sick to death of it. As for the AFL before, what bothers me about these welcome to countries, if they're so important to these Indigenous people to welcome you to their so-called land, why are you asking to be paid? Why do you want money for this? It's never going to end. We've given 6.7 million hectares here in Queensland to Indigenous people since the 1991 Aboriginal Land Act was passed. Then on top of that, we learned since The Voice, we've got 72 of these native title claims underfoot here in Queensland. We celebrate so many different Indigenous days, weeks, sorry days. We just don't seem to give up on it, and it's never enough. The Australian people have had a gutful of it. They sent a very clear message in October last year and said, no, we don't want the division. I feel extraordinarily sorry for the Indigenous people who don't want this as much as you and I, but there is just this small group of people, it doesn't matter. It's the Greens, the Cannabis Party were behind trying to get that pushed over there in WA to get rid of Australia Day. Shame on them, shame on the Greens, and shame on all of these political parties who continue to foster division in this country, and in particular here in Queensland, where we've now got this hearing for the next 3 years into truth-telling because the Liberal National Party and Labor passed treaty legislation in the state. It's disgusting that it's happening. It's, all it's leading to is greater division and reparations. That's what we can look forward to.
I like the idea of all candidates putting out their position on welcomes to country before people vote. Very good precedent there, James. Well done. Internal documents, University of Sydney, have cast doubt on whether officials acted on warnings they got about the presence of Hizb ut-Tahrir at these pro-Palestinian encampments that were there. The Australian's reporting that emails obtained under FOI laws don't mention the extremist group until the 9 newspapers published a report in June. Now, this is despite the fact that the Vice-Chancellor told the New South Wales budget estimates that the uni had acted on warnings from early May. Now, Peter Dutton didn't mince his words on Ray Hadley about this today. Have a listen.
I think both Mark Scott and David Thodey should resign. If they had any shred of integrity, they would have resigned by now. Both men were aware of the situation, even though they might deny it, and I don't think their positions are tenable.
Pretty forceful language there, Lucy. I mean, Hizb ut-Tahrir doesn't get any worse than that. I put them in the category of Hamas and others. Surely we've got to do better here, particularly as we get close to October 7 and the 1 year anniversary.
It's really devastating, Peter, I think, that we've ended up in a situation like this where you have a university that's effectively bowing down to a terrorist group. Let's remind people that they are a prescribed terrorist group by various nations around the world. If you belong to or express support for Hizb ut-Tahrir, you could face 14 years in prison or fines in the UK, for example. So why it's not being recognised as a terror group in Australia is certainly quite concerning as one point. But I agree with Peter Dutton there. They should be resigning. If you don't have an obligation and a duty of care to your students there at the university, because what the spokeswoman for the University of Sydney is effectively saying is, well, and I'm paraphrasing, well, this isn't our problem. It's not up to us to determine which groups are radicalised or extremist. But hang on a minute, you do have an objective and a duty of care to your students. What we've seen since October 7 is an extreme rise in anti-Semitism. You've seen students demonised. You've seen them, feeling and fearing for their lives. Some of these students are in fact considering transferring, and 19% of them aren't even turning up to classes anymore because of the rise in anti-Semitism.
I know, I've got to jump in there, Lucy. Couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. Both have a terrific weekend. I'll see you